Unconventional Life. Welcome. This is your host, Jules Schroeder. Today we've got a very special guest, a beautiful woman that I met at the Forbes Under 30 event last November. We've got Darrah Brustein joining us. Dara, are you ready to take us down the path less traveled?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. Dara is quite a woman of all many talents. Not only does she write for Entrepreneur magazine and many other things. She started several different companies. Her first one in 2009, which was Merchant Services Brokerage, which has grown into 38 different states, still running that country, or that company, I should say. And she's also in 2011 founded Network Under 40. And for you listening, this is really cool. So Network Under 40 helps friends from college basically make friends in their young adult lives. So if you've left college and you're like, where are my people at that are doing cool stuff in the world like me? Network Under 40 essentially is the home to be able to connect with really awesome, like-minded people. And so since starting that in 2011 in Atlanta, she holds these events for around 500 plus people for young professionals to connect with each other. And she's also brought Network Under 40 to many other places like Baltimore and is consistently growing across the country. So Dara, welcome to the show. Go ahead and fill in any details that I might have left out and maybe tell us a little bit about your personal life.
Well, thanks, Jules. It's good to see you again. Like Jules mentioned, we met in Philadelphia at the Forbes Under 30 conference. And for any of you who listen to her or watch her regularly, Jules is pretty magnetic. So yeah, seated in the same vicinity. And I was just drawn to her and loved hearing her story. So I'm appreciative of being here. My personal life, I am an avid world traveler. It's my favorite. I'm a yogi and an acro yogi. Love to read, love to curious about people. So yeah, and I like to run businesses.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're glad to have you. Funny enough, Jenny, that co-founded Acro Yoga, was a past guest on our show. So make sure you get that episode. And for those of you listening, you can go check that one out with Jenny Sauer-Klein. So
that's awesome.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about how this all started. I know you're from Atlanta, you've had this entrepreneurial background, but, take us back to maybe the beginning before, 2009, before the company that you had first started. What was it like growing up, and did you always know you were entrepreneurial, or was there a turning point in which, life was happening maybe in a traditional job and you moved down the path less traveled?
For sure. So backing way up, I grew up on a historic horse farm outside of Philadelphia in like the middle of nowhere and definitely didn't know what the word entrepreneur was. But ever since I was about that age in elementary school or even probably before, had that spirit about me. And my parents used to say I was a natural salesperson, but I thought that meant folding sweaters at a store at the mall. And I felt like they had no hope for my future. But over time, I started to understand what they meant by it because I was the kid who would go door to door and sell things for fundraisers for me and my twin brother because he was too shy, and I would take his and rotate every other door. I would start little businesses like handcrafting jewelry in our sun porch and sell it to every one of my parents who came. Or when I wanted to get my ears pierced when I was a kid, I created poster boards and put them on an easel and convinced my parents to let me do it about 10 years before they told me I was old enough to do so. And I found these small ways that I was willing to sell and be entrepreneurial and create a plan to get to the place that I wanted to go. So as I got older, I started to understand what entrepreneurship was and that was something that I always felt called to do. For me, the struggle was always what the thing was that I wanted to do to become said entrepreneur in a way that I could actually support myself. So over time, I ended up moving to Atlanta from both Philly and Baltimore, grew up between those two places, to come to college. And after school, felt a little bit lost. A lot of my peers went into really traditional professions like consultant, doctor, lawyer. And I knew I didn't want to do those things, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So initially went into the fashion industry. Only thing that came to make sense for me because I felt like I'm pretty good at this sales thing and I'm pretty good and I really like fashion. So like maybe I'll put them together. And I started to learn, I think importantly so, that just because you like something doesn't mean that you should do it for a living. And it took all the fun out of both travel and fashion for me. So I think like many things in life, oftentimes life gives you the kick in the pants that you need to make a change. So while I was unhappy, so to speak, I was comfortable and I was willing to stay in that position, I think subconsciously, even though I knew I shouldn't because I didn't know what was next. And for better or for worse, probably for better, although at the time it felt like for worse. I had just bought a house and was 23 years old. I got let off from that company because they went under, and felt completely torn apart and confused and lost. But it started me down the journey to really figure out how to plug in who I really felt like I was at my core as an entrepreneur with what that business was. And it wasn't fast. It was a slow evolution of doing a lot of different jobs that a lot of people probably would have scoffed at, like being a personal assistant to someone and ripping carpet out of a rehab home that they were doing, or, any number of other things, just to soul search and discover. So slowly but surely I found my way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of great stuff that you're highlighting right now, and a few things that I want to click on. Primarily the thing about feeling like you've had this like inner entrepreneurial spirit. And when you were younger, it was jewelry business or going door to door with your brother, and selling stuff. But then as you get older, it's like, how do you manifest this inner entrepreneurial spirit into something tangible that pays you, that you can make money with in the world? And I know a lot of our listeners, like they struggle with that, which is why so many of us, even if we don't want to go to college, end up going to college, because it's like the nice home for our next natural step. And so, to be able to follow that path and to still know, like, what is this thing? Like, I know a lot of our Unconventional Life family resonates with that. And so then I imagine, like, there you are getting out of school and you're 23 and you buy this house, which is insane to be 23 and having a house. But, not even just that. It's like, okay, well, fashion feels like the next step, but I'm just not sure. And so what would you say, like, in that process, like, how did you navigate feeling this like internal calling, but feeling really like met with like a lot of resistance on how it externally looks like and shows up? Like, how did you navigate that?
I hope I'm catching your question correctly, because we had some breaking up there and I didn't hear the end of it.
Oh, here, let's if it broke up for you, then I'll just ask it again.
Yeah, you're still breaking up a bit, but let's see if I can get it. Go ahead.
Okay. Interesting. It's not breaking up in the earphone for me, but okay. So what was it like for you navigating, having this like inner entrepreneurial spirit and not seeing the actual expression for it in the world, like, manifest yet? Like, how did you navigate that struggle internally?
It felt pretty awful, I'll be honest. Like, I remember writing, one of my favorite articles I've ever written was originally called "The Shit No One Tells You About Starting a Business." And I don't know if I can say that on your podcast or not, but it was my reflection point when I sort of had come over that hump of just kind of getting into a place where I didn't feel like the rug was just going to be pulled out from under me like 100 times before. And I was able to reflect back and see that. And it reminds me of that time period in probably around age like 23 to 25 when I was figuring it out, because 25 is when I started the credit card processing company. And it just felt awful. Like, all of my friends, I felt like, were lapping me in life. Like, they had a direction and it had a pretty clear path set out for them, and they were doing well financially. And by all measures, societally, they were doing great. Whereas I felt like I'm capable and I know I can do this, and I have this vague idea of what I want to do, but I couldn't figure it out. So I really felt like I was floundering, and that, my peers wanted to support me and my family wanted to support me, and in their own ways they did, but in their own ways they helped lay additional doubt on me, feeling like, well, are you sure you just don't want to get a real job, or why don't you do XYZ? And I totally get it, because they wanted me to be secure and that's all that they know, and they were doing their best, but it just made it really hard. It took a lot of, at the time I didn't realize, but like self-assurance to keep believing in that inner voice that said, this is your path and you'll figure it out. And I just sort of had this hope and vision that by the time maybe 5 or 10 years from that point, that I would feel internal satisfaction that would surpass, maybe that 5 or 10 years of financial lag time or other uncertainties that they were having that I wasn't. And I later realized a lot of them weren't super happy in what they were doing, but it was working and it looked good. So they sort of put that facade up. And ultimately, I was glad I didn't just go down that path, because I didn't want to end up in a position like that either.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Unconventional Life family, how many of you are on Facebook looking at other people's lives, and from the outside in, it looks like it's together, there's money and there's jobs, or it's this relationship, or and it's that thing. And I think what you're pointing at is important, and it's that, you don't know what's going on in someone else's life, and all you can really do is look in your own life and kind of navigate what works for you. And so it sounded like your process of navigating wasn't to give up and to get a job. It was like, okay, I'm going to maybe take some of these non-traditional kinds of jobs. And so take us through that. I know you mentioned like pulling out carpet and a few different things like that, but how did you go from that?
Yeah,
period?
one of the first things that yeah, it was like anything in my life, I align it all with relationships. So my parents live in Baltimore. My mom's a full-time real estate investor, and she happened to be at a seminar of some sort in that real estate investment world and met a woman who lived in Atlanta, and she was sort of, she hates when I use this word, but a jack of all trades, and I mean that in the most respectful way. And she said, my daughter's down in Atlanta, and she's an aspiring entrepreneur, and she has interest in real estate and all these other things. Would you talk to her? So I met with this woman, and it turned into me becoming her assistant, where I did everything from writing marketing copy for her programs online to, like I said, like tiling and ripping out carpets and doing electrical work in houses with her, to, I can't even think, like you name it, like random odd jobs. Like I was doing it for this woman. And on the one hand, it was fantastic. I got to learn a lot about a lot of things in a short amount of time. But on the other hand, there were not things that I really was interested in long term, but she was someone who was going to give me a chance and some mentorship, and that was valuable. I worked in retail. I worked in wholesale apparel sales. I was juggling. I was doing a lot of things to make it work and gain experiences. I worked for a company that did high-end home theater and AV systems, like things that were by no means my interests, but I was willing to find what was best in them and learn and keep evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that process of the continuous evolution, I know myself, I've started, 4 or 5 different companies, some that I've had business partners embezzle, had everything, lost everything. I mean, every spectrum of the roller coaster. And I imagine yourself and many others that, we talk to on the show can identify with that. And so I think it's important to realize there's a place and timing for everything, and you have to be willing to not get off the roller coaster ride, even if it is, like you're down in the low and there's no way you can see, the path to the peak. And so obviously you stayed on and, flash forward, you had your one company in 2009, the credit card processing, and now what you're doing, in 2016 is amazing with Network Under 40, which you started in 2011. And in my opinion, when I met you and you told me what this was at the Forbes event, I was like, this is really cool. Like, why did I not have this like tribe of like-minded people to connect to? And so, share us a little bit, about what is happening with that and how you ultimately found that, which is in my opinion, like such a outward expression of who you are and your passions manifested into the world.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's exactly how I would explain it, that I got really lucky to find a way to take who the core of me is and what I believe my gift to the world is, which is being a connector and finding a way to make a living off of it, but while adding value to other people, which I think is how you make a living. So thank you for saying that and giving credence to that. But it all happened, again, sort of by accident and by relationships. I went to school at Emory in Atlanta, and a couple years out of school, a lot of those friends that I had mentioned who were in these traditional career paths either started moving back to Atlanta from graduate school or first jobs, or sort of just started poking their head up from their work and saying, a lot of my friends' lives have changed. They don't live here anymore. Maybe we've diverted in our paths, and not even in a negative way, just the way life starts to go in your 20s and 30s. And they kept asking me, where can I go to make friends after college? And we started talking about it, and we're thinking, well, if you go to a bar, it's like not really where you go and be like, hey, Jules, you look nice. Do you want to be my friend? So it's kind of awkward. Or even at parties, it's not always the most welcoming environment to make great new friends. And every networking event that they'd go to, they felt like it was either too industry focused and they were trying to branch out, or they felt like everyone was significantly older than them and they weren't peers. And then worsely, they felt like people were either trying to sell something to them or they were feeling like it was a meat market and they were getting hit on. And that really resonated with me because having owned and still owning the credit card processing company, a lot of what I did revolved around going into the community and building relationships. But a lot of the people I'd interact with had a really specific goal in mind of, here's my product or service. I need to make connections around helping me sell more of that. Mm-hmm. And I have all these friends who are saying, we don't have that need. We just want to meet people who are our peers. Like you said, Jules, they're like-minded. We want to grow together in our city. So I started Network Under 40 in March of 2011 for that reason. And it wasn't even intended to become a business. It was just let me do this because I like it and my friends have this need. And our first event had 94 people and the energy was electric. And over time, it just kept evolving. And so after a couple years in Atlanta, we started getting press from different national outlets and people started contacting me and saying, this is great. How do I do this in my city? And that really took me a long time to decide, is this something that I can really help people with, or should I just tell them what to do? And ultimately realize creating these types of environments for people are not simple, and getting people that want to be together in the same place at the same time has a little bit of a magic finesse to it. So created a model where we help people develop these in their cities. So like you mentioned, we're in Baltimore, we're in DC, and we've even started an over 40 division and are looking for other cities, just basically not the major markets in the US, where I do think there's a lot of opportunities for people to connect there, where people are really looking to make these genuine connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And we'll have more information a little bit later on the show about, if you're interested, how you can kind of plug into that. But, it seems like, like you said, you're tooling around, you're noticing this missing, really. And it's like, hey, like, this is something I hear all my friends talking about. And I want to highlight this because often we feel like, how do we find the thing, right? Like, we're always trying to find the thing. But most of the time, the thing finds us. And so there you are, listening to your friends and seeing this need for something, and for yourself of like, people just want to have no agenda for connection and have an avenue to do it. And so it's like, okay, let me just throw one dart. Let's have a whatever event. Who knows what will happen? You end up getting 94 people on your first go, which is awesome and remarkable. But then to just kind of like throw a dart with no attachment to it, in a lot of ways is what started this podcast. It was like, I really feel like I live a non-traditional life and I want to talk to more people that do, and I have no idea where it's going to go. And then here we are in this conversation. But it's like throwing that first dart or that first step and letting it kind of unfold, and then recognizing like, hey, that was really fun. Like the energy, like you said, was electric. Like that felt really good. There could be something more. And so I find for those listening that are wondering, maybe you're in the position of like, how do I find the thing? The thing finds you if you're willing to listen and if you're willing to pay attention. And it sounds like that's in a lot of ways what happened with you on this journey.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that. You've got to be receptive.
Yeah, totally. So awesome. Well, Network Under 40, is in a lot of different markets and expanding to not major cities. What's the reason behind that? I imagine, knowing who you are, there's probably some cool thing behind why not wanting to blow up into all the major places.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's natural for people to expect, okay, you're going to hit LA and San Francisco and New York because that's cool and that's where young people are, which is true, and they are. But having started in Atlanta and launching to these other markets, like being from Baltimore and launching there and then going to DC, I realized that there's a thirst and a craving in some of these, and I don't mean any insult to these markets, but a slightly smaller market than these major cities where there's so much pulling at people's attention. Whereas when you go into a place like Baltimore, there's so many young people doing cool things that can never find each other because there's not a conduit or a resource that's helping them do that. Whereas in these other places, it's a lot easier if you're looking for it to find it. So we really want to help people where there's more of a craving.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. Well, let's peel back the curtain one layer before we move into our rapid fire round. So for those listening that are curious about the revenue model, so like, you bring cool people together and you put on an event, like how is that a business? Like give us just kind of like the bird's eye view on how it works.
Yeah, our revenue comes from two sources, from ticket sales and from sponsorships. And both of those factor in a great deal into the revenue.
Yeah, awesome. So, I mean, if you put 500 people to an event, it can definitely be lucrative, I imagine.
Exactly.
So, awesome, cool. Well, Dara, let's move into the rapid fire round, which is my favorite part of the show. Are you ready?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. What was the number one obstacle you faced in your path of following the road less traveled?
Myself. I mean, it took me no time to think about that. I have always struggled with confidence and feeling like everyone else is going to do this better than I can, or there's a million reasons why I shouldn't. And so I was probably, and probably still am, my biggest deterrent to greater success.
All right. Next question. What was the worst advice you ever received?
Oh, gosh, probably the opposite, where it's just like keep listening to other people's advice. And I've learned to find this healthy balance between trusting my own instincts and listening to outside opinions. And it really is this ongoing juggling act of not shutting out advice, but not allowing everyone's to come in, and really asking for and embracing the advice from people that you trust and respect, but still sieving it out and coming up with those bits of gold at the end that are the ones that resonate still with what your gut is telling you, because you have to be the one to move it forward. And if it feels foreign and doesn't really fit with where you're going, then it's not going to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. All right, next question. What is a personal habit that you practice daily that you feel contributes to your success?
Meditation. I'm so glad I can answer these questions. Meditation is something I've been doing for about a year and a half or 2 years, and there's so many benefits that I found from it. For one, here's my cat. For one, I'm a lot more even keeled. I've always been, like, personality wise, really even keeled. But when business drama would happen, I would be really quick to ignite and feel stressed beyond belief and let it take over. I'm a lot better now at sort of working through it and seeing the bigger picture. And it's helped me sleep a lot better, which certainly gives me more energy. And there's a number of reasons why I'd say meditation has been helpful for me.
Awesome. Next question. How old are you?
I'm 32.
32.
You lots ask a woman. I'm not
on this show, we do. Yeah. Awesome. And if you could say something to your 20-year-old self 12 years ago, what would you tell her?
I mean, it sounds so cheesy, but I actually said this to a high school class recently. Like, just believe in yourself. I really believed in myself a tiny bit, and the more I learn and try and throw myself into stuff and realize really the worst that can happen is you fall down a little, but then you pick yourself back up and it's not a big deal and no one's really paying any attention anyway, as much as we think people care. Like, the more that I can just say, like, I have certain gifts that are mine specifically and trust in those, the better off that I've done.
Yeah, awesome. And lastly, what does living an unconventional life mean to you?
For me, it's really based on freedom. I highly value freedom and designing a life, and I think that word is really important, designing it within as much control as one has, to really resonate with what your values are. So for me, it's not just doing the college to career to climb the ladder path that I think a lot of people eschew and think is what we need to do. For me, it was really being intentional and designing it on paper and through narratives and through vision boards and through everything I could do to envision what it felt like worked and resonated for me at my core, and not just what other people expected of me.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. Well, Dara, thank you so much for being on the show today. For those that are listening and want to learn more about Network Under 40, either where the events are happening, and I know you're also expanding markets. So for those of you that are like, hey, I want to host one of those in my city, living in Boulder, Colorado, I'm like, Dara, how can we get our people over here? But if you are someone that wants to, maybe partner with Dara in this mission, where can they find more information about Network Under 40?
They can go to networkunder40.com. It's the number 40, and there's a tab called Start an Event in Your City, and be in touch.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dara, for tuning in. Unconventional Life. We will see you next time.
Thanks, Jules. Thanks, everybody.